Hello and a very warm welcome to this digital conference organized by the Forest Stewardship Council by FSC Germany. My name is Maria Grunwald. I'm a German journalist and I will be your host today. Let's check the main idea of this conference. FSC Germany really has the aim to offer honest and critical discussions about the pros and the cons of FSC certification. This conference includes 6 different discussion rounds on 6 different dates and dealing with FSC certification in different parts of the world. We talked, for example, about the FSC certification in the Congo Basin. We talked about FSC certification in Russia, and today we're going to talk about FSC certification in the Ukraine. Western Ukraine contains some of the largest remaining tracts of forest on the European continent, home to brown bear, to Eurasian wolf, lynx, and European bison. But these forests are in crisis. Their existence is threatened by rampant illegal logging, illegal wood export, and timber-related corruption. That's why Ukrainian wood is considered a high-risk wood. And of course, it's Europe which gets the most of the wood from Ukraine. 70% of Ukrainian wood exports end up in Europe. Can FSC certification fight illegal logging, fight corruption in the forestry system there? That's the question for today. And before I introduce our wonderful speakers of today, here are some rules of the game. If you were already in the audience from the former discussions, you will know it, but I just have to say it once again. Here are the rules of the game. It is my job during the first 45 or 50 minutes to interview our speakers. That will be my job for the first 45, 50 minutes. And then I will open up for you, for the audience. You can collaborate, you can ask questions, and I have to explain you how you can send us those questions. You have 3 ways to do that. You can send an email to a German email address. So that's why I switched to German. The German Gmail address is konferenz@fsc-deutschland.de. I shall repeat that, konferenz@fsc-deutschland.de. That's one way you can send us your questions. But of course, there's another way, and you see it just below your video window. There is a button called FNA, Frage und Antwort auf Deutsch, or Q&A in English if you have it in English. It's called Q&A. And there you can post your question. I will check that, I will monitor that, and then I can just say the questions to our speakers. And then there's a third way. If you want to say by yourself your question, to ask by yourself your question, and if you want us to hear you in your own words and hear your voice, then you can use the button raise hand or Hand erheben auf Deutsch. Hand erheben or raise hand. If you do that, the organizers will monitor it, and then actually you will get the microphone and you will have the opportunity to ask your question all by yourself. That's also possible. And I really invite you to do so. And please, if you send us a question, make sure to really send a question. Don't send very long comments here. This is not about monologues. This here is a discussion. And of course, we want clear questions, and hopefully we get also, of course, clear answers. That being said, I would like to introduce our speakers, and I will start with Pavlo Kravets. He is Director FSC Ukraine. He's joining us right now from Kiev. He is very fond of the new National Forest Stewardship Standard in Ukraine, which became effective last year. FSC International calls it a very robust standard. So let's see, we will talk about it for sure. Pavlo Kravets says, yes, we are working in Ukraine in a really hard environment. Yes, we have a fragile state. Yes, we have a lot of illegal logging going on. We have a problem with corruption, but we continue working here. We are open for challenges. And if we don't care about the forest, who will? That's what Pavlo Kravets says. Thanks for being here today. Then I also say hello and a very warm welcome to Michael Maris. He's Chief Information Officer and Director of IT at FSC International. He's joining us from the FSC International office located in Bonn. And he is not so much an expert in Ukrainian forestry issues, but as IT director, he's responsible for developing smart tools which help to identify certificate holders who could potentially defraud the system, who break the FSC rules. And they will introduce such a new tool based on blockchain technology in Ukraine in April this year. It's a pilot project. And Michael Maros expects that FSC certified companies will then have a high value tool to really verify how compliant all their suppliers are regarding FSC requirements. And that will need, of course, more explanation during the discussion. Michael Maros, thanks for being here. We also say hello and a very warm welcome to Sergei Sipsey, joining us from Kiev. He is forestry professor at the National University of Life and Environmental Sciences of Ukraine. He is also head of the Regional Eastern Europe Fire Monitoring Center. And he says, hey, it's good to have FSC working in Ukraine. The biggest achievement of FSC in Ukraine is creating more awareness for the need of a sustainable forestry management. And let us remind that he was also part of the National Working Group on the FSC National Standards. We also welcome Johannes Zahnen, who is joining us from Berlin. He works for WWF, for the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and he's an expert on illegal logging issues. He visited Ukraine, he did field studies there, and he says FSC failed to introduce effective requirements in Ukraine to stop illegal logging or to fight corruption. And he says that FSC is too weak to survive in such a high-risk area. And last but not least, we also say hello to Dirk Riestenbach-Patt. He's joining us from Berlin. He's chairman of FSC Germany. And well, he made this conference possible. And he has a very special role here. Actually, he's not a speaker, but he's not explicitly an expert on Ukraine, but he's also always joining these discussions that we also have the German perspective in here. Thanks for being here today as well, Dirk Riestenbach-Patt. And my first question goes to Johannes Zahnen. You said that FSC is too weak to probably survive in this high-risk area in the Ukraine. Why is FSC too weak?
Well, WWF runs several market surveys on different products, especially on charcoal. And charcoal, you should know that the biggest source for Europe is Ukraine. So Europe is importing about 750,000 tons of charcoal, and about 20%, and this is the biggest country, is Ukraine. What we found is manifold problems, not just from Ukraine, also from other countries, but very often linked to Ukraine. And what shocked us was that we found similar problems in certified and non-certified products. So after running market surveys, FSC started to have extra audits, and they controlled the market, and they found several companies that breached FSC rules. And to me, the big question is, shouldn't a scheme like FSC be able to find the black sheep out of the normal system, and not just after NGOs running market surveys, finding corrupt companies cheating the system? But this should happen out of normal audits, and obviously this was not the case. So the question is FSC, the way they are setting up and running the system, strong enough at the moment to really fulfill the requirements and to work to the level they are communicating? This is certainly the case in countries with less problems, but at the moment there's no extra audits, no control system, no whistleblower system, extra or auditors coming from other countries. This is just the result was too weak according to our interpretation.
Mm-hmm. So you would say extra audits or more control would be very, very good. What do you say? Because following an FSC and investigation, and also your investigations, and also the investigation of Earthsight, the non-governmental English organization, which reports on pressing environmental issues. After that report, and they criticized a lot of the in the Ukraine, and you also mentioned a lot of critical points here, especially the charcoal supply chain. After that, actually, in 2018, FSC terminated 63 certificates in the country. So there has been a consequence. Isn't that enough?
Well, definitely. That's what I appreciate. But the point here is that an NGO came up and highlighted the problems. And
Earthsight, or WWF, the WWF. NGOs in general.
Both in general. So they highlighted the problems, and FSC started to investigate, and they confirmed and they suspended and terminated certificates. But NGOs can't do the whole job. They just can highlight single areas like charcoal. But well, what's with plywood, what's with sawnwood? We can't check everything. And as a system like FSC, they should be able to deal with the problem out of the normal audits and control mechanisms without help from outside. If we continue like this, it would mean companies are earning money with FSC, audits are cheap and weak, and NGOs have to do the job to find the black sheep and to strengthen the system. And that's not the way I want to see a certificate.
Okay.
Highlighting or communicating this wood is coming from sustainable forestry.
Okay, I think we got the point. I think we got the point, definitely. You were pretty clear on that. Let's listen to Pavlo Kravitz, because we started with all these critical points. FSC has been criticized a lot for its work in Ukraine, and because FSC certified companies have been involved also in criminal activities as illegal logging or corruption. But FSC says we addressed this problem and we introduced a new forest stewardship standard in Ukraine last year, so 2020. What is the most important new measure that FSC introduced last year in Ukraine in order to improve? What would you say? What was the most important new measure?
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, audience. And I would like to use this opportunity to bring more lights about FSC and how we operate in Ukraine, as well as I'm welcome critics and comes from WWF, because critics for us, it's like fuel for engine to produce energy for changes. And thanks for that. We learn about some difficulties and to put in our new standards. And for example, for example, special criteria related corruption evaluation. It is our in standards, as well as we use risk-based approach and strengthening some measures, especially to see about sustainability, because one of issue was raised by our stakeholders. It is an increased amount of logging, and it is some dangerous for sustainability. And we add some additional measures and special measures to strengthen our standards, as well as a very important tool in our standards. It is adaptive forest management. That means foresters do not wait, for example, 10 years periods when new forest management plan will be adopted. they can able to react faster, looking for some natural disaster or to change in social and economical environment. And thank you.
Okay. Of course, I also read about the new standard in Ukraine introduced last year. And the new standard requires, for example, from all certificate holders, a systematic assessment of corruption risks. How does this systematic assessment of corruption risks work?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It means that each forest company has his own system for create measures to protect for corruption, and auditor should to evaluate how its system work. Of course, it's not enough. Yeah, it's not enough because there are some outside of system corruption risk are existing. Therefore, the additional measures and additional tools are required, and we are working on this direction as well together with FSC International. For example, we starting to talk and to develop some tools for evaluation risk before when our ecological NGOs raising issue related to illegal logging or corruption. And now we have additional tools like country risk profile, which can able to use different FSC actors and in particular CB to identify.
CB, I'm sorry, what is CB?
CB is certification body.
Certification body, yeah, okay.
They can able to use and identify most critical topic, because our forest management system evaluation is very spread. It's more than 200 indicators, and to take and to pay attention for most critical points are need to evaluate and to raise the correction action request if it's required.
Okay, thank you very much. So you're working on that, and we already talked about new tools, and that's why my next question goes to Michael Maris, because the new standard in Ukraine also includes pilot testing of new measures, new tools, which help to identify certificate holders who could potentially defraud the system. And you developed a tool, or you and your team, of course, developed a tool which is based on blockchain technology. Can you explain, maybe don't explain what blockchain technology is, that's pretty difficult, I think, but maybe you can explain how this tool somehow works. I mean.
Sure, thank you very much. Well, blockchain is a tool that takes down a registry of transactions, let's say. And transactions are something that's very familiar to FSC's supply chain investigations, because we use something called transaction verification, where we look at volumes being traded through a supply chain in a given period of time. This, however, is probably the opportunity to change from a purely investigative tool to a compliance tool that allows a little bit how Johannes put it. Can we identify the black sheep, identify where there are problems in supply chains before an NGO needs to maybe come to us and identify the problems and open incidents with FSC. So blockchain works in a way that will allow companies to expose their materials handling and trade of FSC materials in the FSC blockchain. They can trust this technology because blockchain has trust and security sort of at its core.
And cannot be hacked, yeah.
Very difficult to...
or very difficult at least, yeah.
Very difficult, but without, and what it really means is without revealing sensitive business information, but showing how verified the company is, but not only how verified the company is, how verified their suppliers and their suppliers, and so forth down the chain. This allows for a situation that will let data emerge, even if companies are colluding or have some other corrupt method of putting information into the blockchain. It will emerge because of data analytics. Data analytics is something that allows you not only to do analysis to say, what do you see, but you see why you see it. Is the why that you see verified transactions because of corruption, or is it because of honest trading? So these types of tools and data analytics are fundamental to trying to root out the real bad actors in supply chains.
To find the black sheeps. And then you decided to introduce it first in the Ukraine because Ukraine is such a high-risk area.
Well, we decided this because they're specifically the high-risk value, also the charcoal investigations that Johannes mentioned. I mean, it's true that NGOs can't find everything and report it to FSC. But in this case, important learning and actions happen from that supply chain investigation, which continues even today. We look at charcoal every single year. Not only did we terminate certificates, but we learned what kind of tools they were using to cheat the system. We also got some of those certified companies to turn things around and stop cheating the system and be sustainable in their practices in terms of certification. So a lot of learning comes from those investigations, which we put back into our assurance system, but also learn what technology tools can help us improve beyond just an investigation.
Okay, and would you go so far and say that maybe such a tool could be somehow a game changer? Or would you say maybe that's just too much of interpretation?
Blockchain, it as a technology has a lot of hype, but it also has, it's out and being used not only for cryptocurrencies, but in commercial operations today. So I think it's beyond its hype period. But I do think that it is a game changer because technology can protect business-sensitive information while revealing the critical pieces of volumes passing through a supply chain to identify where there are problems. But also, in terms of what people know about transaction verification today, most of those under investigation, let's say in charcoal, were the good actors. The bad actors were identified, but everyone suffered the consequences. With blockchain, the value goes back to the certificate holder company that can actually say, I want to see if my suppliers are, well, they must see if they're certified, but they can also look how compliant they are based on what kind of trade flow and verification of trade flow is happening.
So you hope for that we really can check all of the supply chain. Sergei, before I ask once again Johannes' son if he's happy with that, but before that, I would like to hear from Sergei. What expectations do you have? I mean, you're here sitting as a scientific, of course. And what expectations do you have regarding these new tools of verification, these new measures? Do you think that will help? Or would you rather prefer other options to fight illegal logging, to fight corruption?
Of course, we should fight illegal logging and corruption first. This is a rule. This is a big round. I can say that what we can see now with our life, with all these smartphones, with technology, with blockchain, with remote sensing, it is changing rules almost every day. So now when we meet with foresters, with forest enterprises, with our students, we tell them, you know, we can see every single tree you harvested. This is very easy. So even now without blockchain, actually the control for logging, it could be in a quite high level. And for example, in Ukraine, this electronic chips system implemented when every log actually chipped with some for tracing. It's already helped. It's already changed situation because it's some system on place. So in terms of course, I would like to say that we should understand that forestry in Ukraine, like forestry in Europe, like everywhere, now faced huge challenges related with climate change. And you maybe should take into account that Ukraine is a little bit different in terms of nature condition, because we are on the border between steppe, between very dry condition. We have, for example, sandy area on our south without any, it's just dry area. So Ukraine is very diverse. And so if we are talking about illegal logging, etc., it's very different depending on eastern, western, north, or south. And talking about the role of FSC, I answered, I hope, your question about blockchain, and talking about FSC role, I think it's very important because among all forest policy mechanism, FSC brings this very clear understanding for ground foresters what is a sustainable forest management through their principles, through their system, very precise, very clear, and very simple. And so the foresters who would like really to get a best understanding, a better example of how to silviculture doing or whatever, they can use it. This is a huge opportunity, very great opportunity for Ukrainian foresters to look. There is a system on the ground. It's already here in Ukraine. And you need just some changes in your management, and you can get this to be certified.
So you would say that FSC gives like practical guidelines?
Yes, it takes your hands and
does a lot of training.
Let's go together. And if you look on Ukrainian history after 91, when we got an independence, this is a permanent moving to European level, to European values, to kind of this our target. And FSC is a part of this movement of Ukraine toward European values in forestry. Of course, it's a world system, I understand, but somehow it's make us closer. And I don't want to tell that everything is excellent, but we have excellent example who take the rules, take the principles, take the system, and did it, implement it in the best way, even much better than it's required.
Okay, so you take into account a little bit the history, of course, and the surrounding, and you say FSC right now does a lot of training, gives practical guidelines, and it's a good thing to have in the Ukraine. But still, of course, I have to ask Johannes Zahn once again. You have heard all the arguments here, and we have talked also about new smart tools, blockchain tools. Would you say there's a lot of potential that things get better because FSC since 2018 improved or eliminated certificates, etc.? So there have been consequences. So would you say there's a lot of potential, at least, that things get better, or would you say that's just a drop in the ocean?
I think we have to distinguish here between options and realities. And if you want to fight illegal logging and wood trade, number one is transparency. So that's key. Whatever way and whatever tools you use, key is transparency. And if I look back to the last years, FSC started a fiber testing program, which has a lot of potential. They discussed OCP, they're discussing blockchain, and they are running a database that contains the wood species linked to each FSC certified product. And that's also a part of the transparency system. But end of last year, they stepped back and they have less duty now to fill the database with the species, which was very sad and a step back from my opinion. So I do think
Why did they step back?
Well, that's a question to FSC.
Okay,
the whole discussion on the database was also very much fired by the charcoal discussion when companies complained that WWF is putting pressure on them because they filled the wrong species in the packages. And obviously, the industry won the battle, and FSC stepped back, and they have less duty now on the database, which is very bad, from my opinion, concerning transparency. So, another reality of FSC is that they just finalized their strategy for the future, and the NGOs pressured very much to put more focus on quality instead of growth. But the opposite happened. So FSC has still a major focus on growing as fast as possible. Quality is mentioned, but not as a major goal for the next years. So my answer to the discussion here is, yes, I do see a big potential in blockchain. But when is it coming? Is it just a project now? Is it one country? It's nice to discuss these possibilities, but in the end of the day, we need a strong system, and not in 10 years. We need it in the short term. And at the moment, I see some developments inside the FSC system that go extremely in the wrong direction.
Okay, in the wrong direction because you say they focus on growing. And well, if you talk about the Ukraine, FSC has been growing a lot in the Ukraine in the last year. There also has been, let's say, a FSC boom in the Ukraine. Pavlo Kravets, would you also say that you're growing too fast, and because you're growing so fast, you cannot put focus on quality? Or stronger controls, sorry.
Thank you, Maria. I agree that last year and last decade we will have very fast growth because it's like a market demand in Europe. And please note that I guess it's like a challenge because the fast growth and our stakeholders maybe do not understand clear rules, procedures, and like economical interest to grow faster than other stakeholders and understanding rules and procedures. But for other hands, we will have more connection with Europe, as well as we have feedback like code of practice, some rules and rules to improvement forest management. Therefore, it is not so simple question for simple answer for your question. And of course, there is a space for improvements, but I would like do not discuss some specific tools, for example, blockchain or Wood ID or for something other. We understand some difficulties. We lesson learn and we prepare holistic approach to solving problem are currently existing in Ukraine, and we would like to do on a different direction at the same time. Of course, we have a more robust national standards. The second part of our activity to work in collaboration with our auditor and to bring knowledge and skills about risk-based approach, just to pay attention for some specific issue are needed to verify more deeper. As well as third part, it is create more link and mutual understanding between our stakeholders, because if we have joint thinking and joint understanding with stakeholders, we can able to move forest reform and to create forestry policy are extremely required now, because some tools separately from whole picture, overall picture, cannot able to solving problem existing in Ukraine. And finally, I guess we needed to divide it two things. It is like integrity and credibility issue. In general, in Ukraine, there are very like a negative perception about forest sector in general. And I guess we need to take into account when we talk about FSC role and how we can how we can able to play more robust and more important role for solving all of these problems. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty clear. There are a lot of challenges there. I think it's not very easy to work there and to meet all the criteria, but it's also a problem of controlling. The question was if FSC International or FSC in general is growing too fast. It's still my question. Michael Maris, I know that you're director of IT, but still you're representing FSC International. Would you also say that that might be one problem, that FSC grows so fast that it cannot focus on stronger controls or better audit system, etc.?
Well, from my perspective, of course, I look at the data. So many locations in the world. What I would like to say is this: FSC is absolutely not adverse to taking out bad actors from the system. So those certificates that we terminate or even block from recertification if they've gone against and not cleaned up the problems that they've had, then we're not adverse to that. So growth is not a problem. I would say this: from the perspective of forest management and knowing that Ukraine has quite a rich set of forests that are important, as was mentioned at the beginning of this event, I would say that it's important to get those forests under FSC standards. And I would think that that's of high importance, recognizing that, of course, the environment in the Ukraine, as has been said, is not an easy one. But I think that, overall growth is not just a means to an end. We want a good, solid system and actors that are acting proper in the system.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that. I would like to go back to the problem of corruption, because I know it is a big problem over there. We have talked about tools which could help. We have talked about more transparency that we need. Sergei, what would be your answer? I will ask again. I know I asked it already, but how, if you would give recommendation for the forestry management in Ukraine, how could they fight better corruption? What would you say?
I think I agree with Johannes that actually transparency is the key for solution of transparency of corruption. That we have a conflicting system of management in national forest resource management system. This is a conflict of economic and control and legislation functions of our central body, national body. So this is one of the reasons of those problems that Pavlo mentioned and Johannes mentioned, because we should remove these conflicts from top management. This is the first of all. And now some steps, as far as I know, government doing some steps, making some steps toward new strategy and new institutional arrangement of because you should understand that Ukraine actually faced dramatic changes during 20, 30 years from completely public property on everything to completely private property on all agricultural lands, and only forestry become public. And we have now this kind of tradition in managing forests, like in Germany, private forests, for example. So we have good tradition on managing public forest without market. This is our tradition during decades. So now we are in an open market, exposed to open market condition, and this with a wrong system or system that need to be adjusted or improved national management system. This creates these risks and the problem. So I think in terms of on the level of forest enterprise, it's no problem. The problem is environment around or behind the forest enterprise, outside them. This creates these risks. So
what do you mean with outside?
I mean that the policy itself, the most important is actually policy, because this conflicts with, let's say, under different understanding of legislation or even different legislative initiatives that are controversial. This comes from different national impact group, environmentalist or local population or ministry or whatever. And they are not united around the table that can be called forest. So they have their own interest, and this is a kind of huge conflicts around forest as a good source of income for rural population, because our rural population is suffering because agriculture becomes industrial with well-equipped machinery, etc. So very few people are running agriculture, while forestry is really important in rural areas. And this creates the precondition for
illegal logging,
corruption and illegal logging. Yes, and so I think transparency is excellent, and the technology is excellent. Okay. Open data is excellent. This is a solution. Yes.
Okay. And what is FSC taking care of transparency in order to minimize corruption? Would you say they are able to create enough transparency to at least minimize corruption?
Yes, for the moment, it's everything actually available on the website. All information on all reports, because I look for reports, and this is actually FSC. The first system or process that open a lot of data about forestry in Ukraine. And now they're open and they're available for everybody. And this big step toward transparency. But of course, we need more. But we need the better system, first of all, better forest policy.
Okay, let's talk about another solution Johannes Zahnen or WWF proposed, because they say we have to take care that the controls are really strict. We have to take care that auditors can just do their work and are not threatened, for example, or are not being bribed in order to mismatch FSC criteria. So in order to create that, Johannes Zahn said, well, we would actually need international auditors and not local auditors. Johannes Zahn, I think you also know some of those cases where regional auditors have been threatened. Can you say more about that?
Well, we got hints from Ukraine that auditors were threatened. There are cases where former WWF colleagues were threatened. There are manifold articles about auditors, even police in Romania being threatened and physically injured and beaten. In Romania, we even have killed foresters. So this is a real problem. And I question myself, is it possible to run an audit if you're auditing a fraudulent company and a corrupt company? The risk is extremely high that the company tries to influence the audit by the one or the other way, by corruption or offering corruption or in threatening the auditor. And I think one of the easy changes FSC could do is, if you have critical countries like the Ukraine or many other countries, this is not just about Ukraine, it could be quite easy to have a system where the auditors is chosen from outside, goes in, do the audit. So there's much less possibilities to threaten or to bribe the auditor. That could be quite easily and in the short term be fixed.
Okay, so because I mean FSC, of course, takes very much into account to have a very good controlling system or audit system. That's of course one of the aims of FSC, but it doesn't work always as well as they would like to. Pavlo Kravitz, what would you say? I mean, would that be a good idea to have more international auditors working in Ukraine and not regional auditors? Would that help?
Thank you. In general, yes, I agree with this idea, and I guess it will be, of course, to increase transparency, to share some experience, as well as to prevent some maybe problems on a system. At the same time, I would like to add that in accordance with current rules, every 3 years, the audit team should be changed. Yes, but but normally they change by national auditors, and I would like to, if we pay attention, that looking for some challenges like restriction caused by pandemic of COVID, there are some difficulties to travel, not only inside of country, but of course between countries, and of course it is create additional difficulties that audit outside of country will visit Ukraine or other country where high risk identify. Therefore, I will back for our approach and our idea to use more some digital tools, some remove sensitive instruments will help for auditing. And that is what Professor Zipsev said. Right now, we can able to see and to understand by screening situation in each forest management enterprise. And these tools are available, and we are first who introduce like GIS tool for combating with illegal mining of amber. And this information right now available for certificate holder, for auditors, for competent authorities, and everywhere can able to understand what happened with area damaged by illegal amber mining. How it's what is the dynamic? Is its area increase or decrease, or is it more high intensity or no? And is it a good example how we can able to bring digitalization and of course to use transparency and impartiality for auditing? Just it's adding for what Johannes said. Thank you.
Okay, so you're focusing on digitalization. And Michael Maris, actually, we already have a question. I will open up right now for the audience. So I'm monitoring the chat and I already have a question. Actually, I have 2 questions here and comments as well. And it's about the new tool, the blockchain tool. I was afraid those questions would come. Michael Maris, one German lady, Anna Beck, she asks, could you give us an example how this blockchain chain tool would work? Could you explain it with an example?
An example. Well, the idea of blockchain is registering a lot of transactions, but also having a consensus mechanism to say that they're valid transactions. So within trade of FSC certified materials, the idea is that the company who already has to maintain a register of all of their input materials and output materials, so their trade, that includes the volumes, the species, etc. These transactions, as they trade materials, either buying materials or transforming them and then selling them, would be recorded into the FSC blockchain. And whether they're a large company that has large information systems or a small operation that needs to use a spreadsheet or a web interface, companies will be able to access and contribute to the FSC blockchain. What our system does is basically validates that things match up, but it's also things match up according to how the companies are certified. Are they certified with that product group, with those species? and were they certified at the right time under certain standards? So this combination of data constitutes something that we can verify a transaction. Both parties are in agreement, but also the certification data from the auditors is also in agreement. What this allows is to look at the supply chain in a way that is not only each individual transaction, but a certain number of or level of compliance, meaning I've put in everything into our blockchain, every transaction that I've had, input, output, and they've all been verified. Linking this in this chain without knowing who your buyers or sellers are working with, other companies, you can also get a very good idea, a solid idea of how compliant your suppliers are. This is fundamental because the due diligence that companies do is because of legality, because of FSC certification, it's many times very difficult to dig in. Are they really doing the right thing? You know that they're audited against very high standards every year, but every day they're also trading materials. We know from our investigations that that's where things enter supply chains that don't belong. So that's basically what the blockchain will do.
Okay, thanks very much for that, but you're still not dismissed because we have another question. The question is, who owns the proposed blockchain?
Who owns it? This is a wonderful question.
That's a wonderful question from Wolfgang Schopfhauser.
Thank you. Dankeschön. The platform is owned by FSC. The data is owned by those who contribute the data. And let me say what that really means. FSC doesn't want to know anything about your business relationships. We don't even collect any information on how much you're charging for the materials that you're selling. What we want to know is that you're compliant with our standards. And every time you trade, you're using our FSC trademark license to enable you to trade FSC certified materials. So ownership of the platform is a very important aspect. I have to say this, we have built already, so to also answer a bit Johannes's previous question, is this really coming? Yes, we've built the blockchain solution. We're preparing for these initial pilots in high-risk countries, including the Ukraine, starting in April. But the ownership part is fundamental. Does that mean FSC has all of your data? No. Each entity has the keys to their own data. If I look at the database, if I by chance can get unlikely chance that I can get access, I see a lot of gibberish. I see things that don't make sense because it's encrypted. So those who have the keys to decrypt that information are those who own the data, which would be those companies.
And you're still not dismissed. Sorry, but you see blockchain. Wow, it popped out and everybody's asking about that. Karl-Ulrich Minder, he asks, how can you improve or ensure forest audits and the first data input into the blockchain?
It's a great question. We've worked through this the past 8 months. I talked about materials accounting records, which companies already have to maintain, whether they're using an information system or a spreadsheet to do that, depending on the size of their operation. You need to have an opening balance, sort of like a bank account. So to initiate participation in the FSC blockchain, companies will need to put in an initial balance of transactions that reflect what they currently hold. So again, they maintain these records already. They'll need to standardize on our species and products list, and but otherwise they will open a balance basically so that things that flow to that organization or flow out can also be accounted for.
Okay, thanks very much for that. But you see that there's a lot of interest. I have another question here, which is also, once again, regarding the audits. And Karl-Ulrich Minder, we have to say, that's what he writes here in the chat, that he works 2 years also investigating the Ukraine charcoal issue or the Ukraine charcoal supply chain. And that's why he congratulates FSC to the blockchain decision, because he knows by working on the ground how difficult this is. And he says, well, okay, but I also had the problem that local auditors earn only 30 euro per day. And one told him, I have a wife and 2 children. I do not want to have a black SUV driving up at my house in the evening or at my kids' school with black men getting out and showing you are targeted. So we're talking again about people getting threatened. So I think this question goes better to Pavlo Krawitz. How can you improve that people are not threatened on a local level? Is there any chance for FSC to change that? I mean, it's also, of course, the job of the politicians to do that and of the police to do that, of course. But how can FSG jump in this gap?
Thank you. There is no like a simple question a simple answer for this question, and I guess it's needed to make some decision how to deal with. And of course, it's needed more, I would call, more complex approach, and to identify in each specific case about risk for auditing, and to make a solution for each separate auditing about risk for different type of risk, and maybe made a solution that update some or to see about separate auditor, or maybe to use some remote sensing tools. I guess it's needed to introduce more risk and more screening before audit to identify some difficulties for auditing.
Yes, thank you very much. We have another question where somebody says, sorry, I cannot, I think she or him is called Decker with last name. Well, here's the question. There are many, many different wood product sectors. Of course, we talked now a lot about the charcoal supply chain because there have been investigations in the Ukraine about that, and there also have been consequences by terminating, for example, some certificates. But she or him asks, what is FSC doing in the other sectors in addition to charcoal? I think this goes also to Paulo. Yes, sorry.
Okay, yes, Thank you. Yes, we're starting from charcoal, looking for some risk and raising some evidence provided from Johannes and other stakeholders. To this year, we will, and I would like to back. Last year, we introduced additional requirements to check FSC applicants, not only charcoal, but other applicants, chain of custody applicants from other sector. And this project, this testing of additional requirements, it is positive, it is successful. And we agree to continue the project for this year. Therefore, we will make agreement with auditor to check any FSC applicants which wanted to come in our system, and additional diligence will be used for these applicants. Therefore, we spread additional requirements for other sector out of charcoal.
Thanks very much. And then the organizers just told me that we have 2 people from our audience who actually want to ask their question all by themselves, which means we will be able to hear them in a couple of seconds. So let's see who is the first. Or here, we won't see him, but we can hear him or her asking the question. And I just keep on talking because I think it takes a while to unmute them. Okay, nobody's talking to me. Is there somebody who wanted to ask his question right now? Okay, I can't hear anything. Well, then we just continue here because so far we can't hear. There's another question coming from Ukraine viewer, I guess, and he wonders. This is a question, of course, for Johannes Zahn, and he wonders if. Remember that we talked about international auditors coming to Ukraine and controlling there, and he wonders if international audits would be sustainable considering the increased emissions they would contribute to if they fly in, for example. So, is that a good and sustainable solution, Johannes Zahn?
Well, that's a nice question.
Yeah.
We definitely want to avoid greenhouse gas emissions. Part one of my answer is forest destruction creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's the single biggest emittent of greenhouse gas. So if we are able to fight illegal logging, there's definitely a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. Point number two is, I went to Ukraine several times and I took the night train. So there's not always a need to take a plane. So there are options to avoid greenhouse gas emissions. And I guess there's also part of the question about costs. Yes, taking auditors from other countries to Ukraine would create more costs. But at the end of the day, to me, the question is FSC able to deal with the risks and to reduce illegal logging inside the system dramatically? And in critical countries, it will mean more costs. I think it's nearly impossible to have low costs in all the countries. Doesn't matter which risk you're dealing with. So it's impossible. But the night train is my first option, and I hope this works also for auditors.
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, please use the F&A button. So, because I just saw that some people are using the chat button, but it makes it easier for me and the organizers if we just have to monitor one channel. So please use the F&A button, or if you have it in English, Q&A button, of course. That would be great. Thanks very much. So I'll try if there's another question. Well, there's the other question. It's actually raised from Dirk Riestenpat. He's the chairman of FSC Germany, and he asked a very important question. Do we pay enough for the products? I guess that he means the Europeans. Do we pay enough to the products? As I mentioned before, 70% of the wood exports from Ukraine end up in Europe. So, Dirk Riestenpat, would you like to explain that a little bit more? Because, of course, also Europe has a responsibility here.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I wrote a comment before that, which read, FSC is actually producing value for the people working in it. And I think what FSC is producing in Ukraine is an added value already compared to the forest market opportunities that you have in your own country. And of course, producing enough revenue for an auditor to get a decent payment, so he's not as likely to fall for corruption, might lead to the question that I put in last: do we pay enough for the products? So I think that's addressed to German European markets, but also maybe to people connected to marketing FSC products and how they're valued on the European market. How is the promise of FSC to deliver a sustainable forest management valued by the customers on the markets in Europe? So do you see any opportunities there to address that question? And do you see a connection to the likelihood that corruption is being decreased by that?
And the question is for Pablo, I guess?
I'm not sure. Maybe yes.
Thank you, Dirk. It's for your question. For me, FSC work like a system to collect different stakeholders each other, and if we have more mutual understanding, and then we able to finally to respect each other. I'm sure that common welfare will be increased. And from my point of view, my deep point of view, the corruption and illegal logging, it is like a, I would call, it's like a problems of growth. It's like a infantile disease for state are born, and we will to see new state, new society. Therefore, if we to bring more FSC, if our stakeholders do not recognize as only ticket for European market, if they respect FSC value and understand that FSC to bring value for everybody, and if we join our activity and it helps to connecting people together, the common value, common welfare will be increased. And all of these problems we discussed, like corruption or illegal logging, just gone, because it is a consequences of some difficulties in our country. And FSC can able to play more role than play before. Because Johannes said it's right. We grow very fast, but we grow mostly like economical some value for some company itself. But now we can able to change this situation. And of course, we need more FSC. We need more partnership with different stakeholders, and of course to close cooperate with government, because government play extremely important role, because he is owner of forests. Therefore, I think it is very important time for Ukraine, and not for Ukraine. Ukraine will able to play important role to testing new tools and to bring more consistency and more value for our society, because our society is divided and is unconnected. We need connecting people. That is one of my main message for you and for audience today.
Pablo, I think you're already not dismissed, because we have more questions for you. John Palmer, he asks, he's referring to the Earthside report. We remember that's the report of the British NGO, which also reports and investigates environmental issues, pressing environmental issues. And the Earthside report from the year 2018 notes problems from conflicts in legislation in Ukraine, which make difficulties for FSC and auditors to know which interpretation of that law or rule is correct. So you have rules in Ukraine, but sometimes they are interpreted very different. So, and he asks or wonders if these conflicts have been resolved.
Thank you for your question. Yes, it is one of difficulties and one of some of difficulties in our system, which only increase different risk as well as corruption risk. And one of this example, it is contradiction legislation with different interpretation was raised and lightening in Earthside reports, and we starting to work with this direction. We ask all Ukrainian authority and ask them to explain or to interpret this law regulation, and we have different interpretation. Therefore, FSC FSC needs to make an intervention and to prepare special advisory note, and later special national interpretation was prepared, and finally we solve this conflict law. Therefore, it is one of the examples that FSC will play special role to solving legal conflict inside of country. That is one of the example weaknesses of our state institution in country, and unfortunately, separate international organization need to solving this issue.
Pablo, there were different, I read in your report, in the FSC report, that there were different interpretations of the legislation regarding sanitary logging. Sanitary logging means that actually, well, you say you have to chop down trees in order to remove insects or diseases from a stand-off tree. That's why you do sanitary logging. But in Ukraine, it happens very often that sanitary logging is used as an excuse. So we say we have to save the other stands of trees from insects, for example, but it's used as an excuse to simply cut trees down and then sell them. Why is it so difficult for FSC to simply say sanitary logging is not permitted?
No,
wouldn't that be easier? Because now we have different state authorities that say different things about sanitary logging is possible here and it's not possible there. Why we don't simply prohibit it?
Yeah, thank you for your question. But believe me, the most sanitary logging are doing under the legal requirements. There are different interpretation of different stakeholders, and some of them disagree because it topic about reason. For what reason you signature permits, and there is a lot of I would call interpretation, different type of interpretation. For me, it is a topic that needs to be discussed with all stakeholders, because in accordance with legislation, it's most sanitary logging are do in a proper way, and there are a lot of there is a lot of some disappointments, mostly raised against logging themselves, because people do not want to see clear cutting near house or in a forest, and it is like a big debate about how to continue forest management when, for one hand, we will have a climate change and dieback problem. For other hands, there is need to continue for forest management, and it is a big debate and some misunderstanding, and there are here. Yeah.
Still a lot of challenges there. That's what we hear. We have another question from Dr. Jutta Buschbaum, and she's asking, she knows about the World Forest ID approach, and she says that seems to be a special, suitable tool for regions with high corruption risk. And the question is if FSC has plans to develop this approach, the World Forest ID, in Ukraine.
Thank you. I would like to answer for that question. As I explained before, we have a holistic approach, and we not only would like to test in blockchain. In our work plan is forest ID, and this year we will plan to make some. Like a feasibility study, and to select some forest and to identify supply chain will be used for this project. We know we are familiar with this project, and we would like to introduce and to testing as well.
Oh, okay, thank you very much for this. And then we have Michael Maris. We have again one question. People are intrigued about the blockchain tool. So there is one more question. And he refers to what you said before. You said, that's from Markus Deinzer. You said before that FSC does not have the grip to certificate holders' data in your blockchain, but only the suppliers of the data. If he got it right, I think he got it right. But if so, how can FSC check the data when FSC does not have a grip to them?
It's a very good question. Well, the blockchain is a technology that's set up as a network of entities working together. So you would have in our type of blockchain a network of the FSC, the assurance system, so Assurance Services International, the certification bodies, the certificate holding companies, they would all have their place in the blockchain. So ASI would be able to request that their CBs, for example, provide specific information on a given period of time. So if it emerges that there's an issue at a certain point in a supply chain, ASI would be able to institute the assurance model of getting answers to what's behind the problem and therefore the data. But the FSC would not be able to access that kind of data specific to the details of the transactions.
Mm-hmm. Michael, this question also goes for you. Actually, it's a completely different question, but because of course we're talking today about the Ukraine, which is a high-risk area, but here's somebody who asked, what is FSC doing about countries other than Ukraine? And as I understood it, this tool we're talking about could be introduced also, of course, in other countries. That's not a problem, isn't it?
No, absolutely. In fact, I mentioned this before. We have investigations that are going on in Ukraine in many different locations that have high risk situations. So clearly we're looking at some of those situations where we know a lot about the supply chain that have a good potential to help come out of a pilot with good knowledge of any improvements and how to roll it out to a broader set of certified companies. But absolutely, this is something that blockchain works quite differently than just an investigative tool for a given period of time in a given supply chain. You have from forest all the way to a retailer, and even what we were talking about today, you're talking about a lot of material and products that end up in markets that are not where they start. So it's a good example, starting in the Ukraine and a few other high-risk areas with blockchain in terms of the pilots, but it also is something that by nature will connect to other markets naturally, because in order to have the full picture, you must have the full blockchain information.
Thanks very much. I would like to address another topic, talking about again of the responsibility. And this question goes to Johannes Zahnen. I already said it at the beginning, 70% of the wood export from Ukraine ends up in the EU. And the EU, or the European Union, knows that its huge demand for cheap wood has helped drive illegality in the forests of supplier countries, in the forests of Ukraine, for example. And as a result, we have in Europe the European Timber Regulation, which prohibits European operators the placement of of illegal wood in the European market. We have that rule or that law for a couple of years already now. In theory, we have it, but still many investigations and reports on Ukraine show that a huge amount of illegal timber is de facto sold in Europe. So the question is, how is that possible, and who's the guilty part? Europe, Ukraine, or both? I mean, we do have regulations, but we don't respect them.
Well, that's the point. I think it's good that somebody mentioned the EU timber regulation, because you can't discuss the problems of FSC without the EUTR, and it even links to the marketing topic mentioned before by Dirk. If you have illegal wood on the market, the price goes down, and it's getting more difficult for the companies dealing with legal and sustainable wood. So the better we fight illegal wood, the more chances to market FSC and get a better price. So the second point concerning stability of the EUTR system, the European timber regulation started in 2013, and it's very late, but right now it's under revision. Mm-hmm. And WWF is fighting very hard to close the loopholes in the European timber regulation and strengthen the implementation. So we do have a very similar discussion on the EUTR compared to FSC at the moment. Very interesting here is that the minimum requirement of the European timber regulation is you need to know the species and the origin. And the FSC database was dealing just with the species up to now, but not with the origin. So the FSC up to now not even fulfilled the EUT requirements totally. And if we're discussing the two techniques mentioned today, the wood ID, the forest ID and world forest ID and the blockchain, this could be the link to fill the gap. So this could be a huge step forward to fulfill the EUTR requirements, even if the EUTR will be strengthened. And second, to dramatically reduce the risks inside the FSC system. But again, my question is how and when? Because I introduced forensic methods to FSC in 2005. And since then, they run the fiber testing program, which is great, but it always stayed in the niche. And to me, the big question is, when do you plan to have the breakthrough for these techniques, not just to fight illegal logging inside the charcoal chain, but, well, we have a similar problem with Parkit, for example. So sending out ASI is good, but not enough. It's not big enough to really deal with the problem. We need these techniques. We need forensic methods, and we need blockchain. That's the only way out of the trouble.
Michael Meyers, maybe you would like to answer to that. I mean, because he says, okay, it takes very long until FSC reacts. That's what Johannes Sonnen says. What would you say? Will it be faster in the future?
let me say this. I don't know if I would characterize it that it takes long. I mean, we've done a lot in wood identification, even beyond fiber testing. So fiber testing, I mean, we even this year have already used stable isotope testing. We've used other wood identification techniques. We'll continue there. But what Johannes says is actually right, in my opinion. The combination of blockchain as well as wood identification technologies is probably one important key to solving some of the biggest problems. Why is this? Now, on the time element, there is a time element. A lot of the wood identification, more robust methods that are comparative science, meaning being able to test a piece of wood and actually understand where it comes from, not only what species it is, but actually what regional origin it has. It takes getting samples from forests. And that's something that in particular in the Ukraine, we haven't made a lot of groundwork there. That's something that is, though, fundamental. So that's something that we must work on and must encourage to get done, both inside of certified forests, but even non-certified forests. And I think Johannes would know why I say both the certified and the non-certified. But what's also key is that this type of technology be done in good collaboration with research institutions, scientists, scientific laboratories. This is something that what we've learned, FSC, in being part of the World Forest ID and other networks, has been quite important for understanding where that science is going to take us. We know that we can, if we have enough sample type of material, enough reference sample material, we can actually use this science to identify origin of products in many cases. But what it takes is a massive effort to go and collect a lot of those samples from the forest.
Well, we talk a lot about tools. I know you have, but I have to. I'm the time watchdog, so actually I have to look there. But don't worry, I have a question for all of you at the very end. And actually, it's the same question for everybody of you. It's a difficult question, so but maybe you have a very original idea about it. I once refer again to the Earthside report we talked a lot about, which was from the year 2018. And that report was called, or had the title, Complicit in Corruption, How Billion-Dollar Firms and EU Governments Are Failing Ukraine's Forests. Of course, it's a very somehow populistic title, but we had a lot of revelations there. And this was from the year 2018. Now comes the question for you. It's difficult. If Earthside would repeat its field study and investigation in the Ukraine, let's say from here on 20 years in the future, 20 years in the future. So we're talking about 2040 or 2041. What would be the title of the report by then in the year 2040? Will it be a better title? Won't it focus on corruption? Will it focus on something else? What will you say? What would be the title of a new report in the year 2040? Pablo is looking up, and he's laughing. What would you say? Will it get better?
I guess, and it is my point of view, that no any reports, because no reason to write some critical reports, and we know that is a main mission of Earthside. It is not like a scientific research. It's just to raise some specific ecological and social problems are. And I believe in sustainability. I believe in our role and mission, and we will do everything what we can that no any reports no issued next or what you say 2041.
Okay. As you said on the beginning, you're open for challenges, and you said it will be better. Okay, that's for sure. Johannes San, what do you think if we do this study again in the year 2040? What could be the title of such a study?
Well, I do see two scenarios. If FSC really changed direction and put a lot of effort on the quality side, I would say not in 40, but in 30, it's possible to get rid of the problems.
In 30 years?
No. In 30, so in 10 years. So
in 10 years, okay.
I think it would be possible to collect systematically references, to introduce the blockchain and get rid of the problems. Even in high-risk countries, it would be possible. But scenario 2, if FSC continues with the same speed, it will take 30 years. And to me, this scenario ends with a disaster because no one needs FSC anymore. If you promise this product is coming from sustainable forests, and market surveys, for example, from WWF, again and again show it's not. People get fed up with trusting in the system. So
okay,
I think
we hope for your first scenario. Yes, you have to speed up, and we hope for the first scenario. Thanks very much.
That's it.
Michael Maris, maybe you can make it even a little bit shorter in one sentence. What would you say? What could be the perfect title?
I'm positive that there will be this title in the Ukraine. Ukraine supports emerging economies with sustainability in forestry.
Wow.
The Ukraine will be ahead, and I believe that it's possible.
Okay. Ukraine will be ahead. Wow, that will need a lot of training, but yeah, the potential is there. We talked about that.
20 years is good.
20 years is good. Okay, Sergei, do you have a title for the new investigation?
I'm sure everything will be okay with illegal logging and corruption, so it will not be a case in Ukraine. But I'm afraid that in 20 years, we will have huge climate change problem, and this will be the main topic of our discussion. Unfortunately, seems it will be like this.
Yep. Okay. So climate change, that's the topic for a complete new discussion, of course, because that involves a lot of questions. And we also have Dirk Riest, but you said that you also have a title. What would be your title?
I'm a little more positive also. So my title will be a strong FSC certification is contributing substantially to the welfare of Ukraine and its citizens.
That was very quick. Can you repeat that again?
Strong FSC certification is contributing substantially to the welfare of Ukraine and its citizens. Okay,
so you're also very optimistic and you even wrote it down. Well, thanks very much for this last round. Thank you very much. Johannes Zahn, Sergei Zipse, Pavlo Kravitz, Michael Maris, and Dirk Riesenpatz, all of them our speakers from today. And of course, I also say thank you to our audience. Thanks for your question and for being interested. I hope you stay interested. And there's some last information for all of you. The next discussion panel, number 5, if I'm right. Yes, number 5, will be about FSC certification in Brazil. And that will be on the 10th of March 10th. And if you want to have more information about that, please go on the website konferenz.fsc-deutschland.de. There, of course, you will find more information. Thanks very much. Stay interested and stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.